Well, let's just kick it off. The hospitality industry has changed over the last. What do you predict that will happen in the next 5 years?
If I knew, I probably wouldn't be in restaurants. But one thing I can tell you today, the combination and frustrations, because now the level of frustration that we experience of customers when they arrive, it's much higher than ever before. You know, their tension, their stress, their daily life is upside down. And therefore, you add being hungry to that equation, and it's explosive. So then you have a staff group that is overwhelmed by having to do the job of 4 people instead of having 4 people to do 4 different tasks. It already stressed everybody. Every day we go through the exercise of, first, did our deliveries arrive on time? Did we get what we ordered? Because now we don't get what we order. We order vodka and we get tequila, and the position is, well, if you don't take the tequila, next week there may not be tequila either. So you have to take what you get. You order chicken, you get pork. You order pork, you don't get the pre-challenging. Then on top of that, you don't know if all the cooks are going to show up or all the servers are going to show up. And those who do show up late, and you don't really have much more recourse because you can't replace them overnight. You can't replace them at all. So you are at their mercy. And that's when we start seeing this before the pandemic started, because we were already having very serious issues with staffing and very serious issues with the volume that we were doing in the malls and trying to find things. But the first deterrent was the excess systems. When the first time I was introduced to one of these units, which was about 6 years ago, it was a $150,000 toy, and we just couldn't afford it. Now they're in the 10 to 16,000, depending on the model and features that you want. And on a lease, well, it's a no-brainer how to deploy them. So these robots started to show up, and it started to do 2 main things, or maybe more, but let's concentrate on these 2. First, it assisted our staff. It assisted our staff because it slows it down or frustrates them by not being able to help directly the customers, because they have a lot less time to interact with a customer, to the point that we're trying more of a brand ambassador and transferring the ordering function to the customer itself, so that they can order whatever they want, whenever they want. And now the robot is a lot smoother and a lot faster. That doesn't mean it's easier for the customer at first, because they've never experienced this type of interaction. But once they are, it's amazing what it can happen. We have a customer restaurant, we transfer the order to their table. We fired the order after a server has checked that they didn't order 20 burgers by error. And if everything is fine, then the robot will bring it to their table. And it's interesting because it makes the experience even more intimate, because now you don't have somebody constantly asking what you need, or are you ready to order? Are you ready to order? And then inevitably, when you are ready to order, you can't find the server. So now it's at your own pace, at your own timing, and you can modify the way you want it. So that makes it very easy, but there is a learning curve. So that's from one side. Then the other side is for the customer itself. Yes, we have it all. We have customers that immediately understand, embrace, are fascinated by the whole thing. And interestingly enough, in our case, that group is either 14 years and younger or over 50. The groups that are in the 18 to 45, they look at it, they don't know what to do. They pull a camera or their phone and they start taking pictures, and then just look at it and don't know what's going to happen next, until they're introduced by their function by a server. Whereas the younger ones and the older ones, they immediately grab their food, touch the button, and send the robot back to the kitchen, which is very interesting in our case, because we never thought that those 2 groups will be so much easier for them than the groups that are in the 18 to 40 range. But at the end of the day, what it is really doing is giving the opportunity to maintain the restaurant open, because otherwise the alternative is obviously to close sections or close days in the restaurant. We had about 45 tables within the whole place, and we used to have 9 servers to support that area, and now we can do it with 1 server. Whereas preferably we want to have 3, but unfortunately it doesn't always happen, and we have to do what we do. So one thing is certain: the whole industry is changing. What is it going to look in 5 years? I have no clue. But what I do know, there's going to be ways of interacting in a restaurant. Either you have the fast service, in which everything is going to have to be automated, even the food making probably. Then you have the casual dining, where you're going to have very few because of the costs and the availability. And that's where all these systems become essential. And then you have the very high end, where the whole experience is run by humans, and it will be very expensive price point per person, maybe in the $150 to $300 per person, where you can afford to have only humans if you can find them. But the great integrate this level of support for both the staff and the customer.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you, Taco, for that summary. We hear about this in the media. I talk to it with clients and prospects all day long. I want a human being here. What are the misconceptions? Tell me about, your server's experience, initially and currently.
Well, like with everything, I don't know why I've always experimented with new things, starting from a POS in 1980, where everybody told me I was crazy to introduce that, and it was a total waste of time. And now try to find a server that can run an order without a POS. In 2001, we were the first ones in Dallas to put internet nodes at the bar and the booths, and everybody told me we were crazy, that who on earth will go to a restaurant and start surfing the net. That made absolutely no sense. And look at what's happening now. When we started doing contactless ordering, same thing. And when we started using the robots, the first challenge I had was my staff, because of different reasons. First, they saw them as a useless toy, that it was just gonna take space, where a restaurant is really, really tight. The corridors are very, very small. But one thing that gave me hope was I had never, ever experienced that technology. And this is, and believe me, I've played with everything that you can think of. I've never experienced a technology that starts working within 45 minutes of installation, ever. Not even my POS system. You go through a long period of tweaks and challenges, get it to the point you want, and even then it's not exactly what you want. But with these robots, the engineering team came, they mapped the location. Within 45 minutes, the robots started to deliver food, and they have not stopped ever since. And that was the first thing that everybody thought, this is going to be very difficult, it's going to be very cumbersome, it's going to be very challenging, and no one wants to look stupid, because they make you look that you were expecting how challenging the installation was going to be. So these robots started to work immediately. The first thing I encountered was that the Food Expo had to obviously set up trays and start putting plates on those trays. Then this tray, it's very heavy. It's anywhere from 15 to 25 pounds. And then if you got to do that 30, 40, 60 times per shift, it puts a toll on your arm, and runners had issues with their shoulders and backs. So the first thing that would happen is that now that you had to put all the food in one robot, and it can handle, in our case, up to 8 guests per trip, whether you send to 2 different tables or whether you just send one large table, it can send the whole thing. So that first day, she didn't have to deal with any trays, nor the food runners. And runners that we had before the robots came in, and the last one that we had issues and stopped really quickly. So now we were left just with an expo to run the entire food cycle. And had not had this robot, she would have quit too, because there was no way that she could handle doing all these trays by herself and assembling the trays. So one thing that immediately happened is that the time that it took her to put a tray together, now she was able to put up to 4 tables, launch 4 tables in the same period of time. So our speed of service quadrupled in efficiency, which in itself saved a lot of money. Then the next thing that happened that miraculously had never happened before, and I tried for 40 years to convince my servers that the food should be placed on the table by the server, not just by anybody, because inevitably people either made a mistake on what they ordered, they got the wrong thing, they wasn't sure what they were getting in, and the server would take a few minutes to show up back. And by then the customer was all pissed. I gave them incentives, I gave them threats, I gave them pep talks. I was never able to fix that, ever. I never found a way. Yet with this robot, since the server was always at the dining area, they immediately started placing the food themselves or being within seconds at a table to check that the food was correctly. I was flabbergasted because suddenly I found a solution that I never thought of a problem that I had for 40 years that I could never fix. Then the next thing that happened that blew my mind is that inevitably 1 to 3 times a week, we will lose a tray that was on its way from the kitchen to the dining room, either by an error, by a mistake, or by the balancing of the tray that once you put it on the stand and you're starting to deliver the food, if it is not properly pre-balanced, you take a dish and the whole tray will flip to the other side and get lost. And each one of those losses could be anywhere from $50 to $150 of food and plates that need to be replaced. Well, that thing stopped. We haven't lost one plate since we started in June of last year. That in itself paid for the robots 5 times, because, $300 a week, that's $1,200 a month on lost food in China. That immediately the reaction of customers, once the robot comes to the table and they start interacting and they touch it and it jiggles and they feel like they're in really back to the future. And those areas themselves made a huge lamentation. And of course, the ones that were the first one to say this thing is never going to work, which were my servers, within 2 days, they could not perform without it.
You touch on something I just wanted to speak about. So I'm hearing a shift also. Yes, there is a labor shortage, but how can we offset and retain our staff? Are the robots helping retention?
Well, I don't know if they help retention, because nowadays it's very difficult. Unfortunately, most people that I talk to, what they want to do is have an open schedule to work whenever they want, for whatever many hours they want, for whenever days they want, and for as long as they want. And that's tough in the industry. However, having said that, the ones that are still working, it makes their life easier and much more profitable, because now sharing the tips between 2 servers instead of 6, my average server is making $100,000 to $150,000 a year. And that's working 4 days, which equates to about 6 to 8 shifts. And that is
call you after this.
Okay, but there is a lot of mopping to do because there's no busboys. We haven't found a busboy or a dishwasher in a year and a half. But let's put that aside. So the thing is that the one thing that we are contemplating now is microshifts. And the reason why we think we may be able to do microshifts is because if customers order themselves and servers don't need to immediately be experts on how to order and the products, then we could foreseeably hire people that come just for 1 of the 2 hours that we have the rush to assist the 1 or 2 servers that are there, pay them handsomely, $50, $100 an hour, and then they can go home and not expect them to be on a schedule and do one of those flex platforms that allow people just to come for a small period of time. And that may be another way to tap into labor. But the reality is that less and less people want to serve, and more people wants to serve, because everybody wants convenience.
I think you speak about the cost of living also.
Yes.
Living paycheck to paycheck is infamous in this industry. So getting cash advances.
Exactly.
I remember those days. So hopefully, getting a higher wage, getting more tips is offsetting those issues. Taco, let me touch on, got a lot of restaurateurs out there. I'm sure we have some directors of ops and GMs. What's some practical advice about adopting this technology?
Well, first of all, you do have to have a little patience. Second, you need to have 1 or 2 champions in your team that believes on technology, because it's not the same thing when your boss is telling you this has to work than when your colleague tells you let's make this work. It's a huge difference on energy and expectation and implementation. So you're not going to be able to convince everybody overnight, but if you can find the one individual that understands the vision and you use them as the seed to start converting everybody else, the whole process is a lot easier and there's a lot less friction. But at the end of the day, the technology proves itself. And that if you're lucky enough to have one individual like that, or your manager or owner is really into technology and is not afraid to see what the problem is and find the solutions to it. And the problems that you find are very, very, very simple. It's mostly on redirecting the flow of the traffic, or the location where the robot should stop and how it should stop, so that even if you move the table, it's still practical. And those things need a little tweaking here and there, but they're very, very minor compared to compared to reprogramming your POS or adding items to your POS. This is much simpler. So if you're not the one with technology savvy, then find the one in your staff that will help you, reward them, and help them make this a success, because it will be a success. You know, there's two types of operators: the ones that are having troubles finding staff and helping their staff, and the ones that are lying through their teeth, because everybody is having troubles.
Absolutely agree with you on that. This has been very educational. As I told the audience, that this was going to be a very spirited conversation. You're very knowledgeable in deployment of these robotic solutions. Is there anything else that we've left behind that you'd like to address?
Well, let me tell you about this, because they may be asking what kind of robots and what am I using them for. Right now, we have 5. We have 2 one that delivers food, one that delivers drinks. And the delivery of the drinks, that was an eye revelation, because, you know, there was a lot of spillage, there was a lot of confusion, and it took a long time sometimes to take a drink from the bar to the table because no one was available to deliver the drink, especially with coffees. We have about 22 different espresso-based drinks on our menu, and if those are not in the table within a minute, they look dreadful. So they have to make it to the table as soon as they're finished. So this robot made it. Now, another thing that is important, and I'm sorry I'm jumping a little bit, you need to give them personalities. Don't make them treat them like a refrigerator. They're not. They are part of the service team. So we gave them names, we gave them personalities, we gave them attitudes, and we gave them stories so that people could relate to them as part of the service, not just as a blender. Because even though they're a machine at the end of the day, they do create a interaction and a link to humans that a regular blender or your dishwasher will never do, even though the function is very simple, just bringing things here and there. So we have one for food that is called Panchita, in honor of one of our cooks. We have one that does the drinks, Alexita, in honor of one of our bartenders. We have Nacho, which is the guy who takes the dishes from the table to the dishwashing area. That has been incredibly helpful. We have another one, which is Fernanda, who takes silverware and water to the table that is deployed by the hostess the minute that a table is assigned, and from the host stand deploys her to bring the silverware and the water glasses with ice. So sometimes they make it to the table faster than the host makes it with the customer to the table. And then we have Coqueta, which is the smartest of all of them, which is a Temi robot who interacts with customers, tell them stories, is the one who does sales, is the one who guides people, kind of like what you were talking about, Pepper, is not taking care of the wait list or the reservation list yet, but that one is the one that has the most promising on very smart activities, even though Puru does a great job in the functions that they have. So we have these 5 robots, and we only have a 3,000 square foot location, of which only 1,800 is dining and a patio of about 1,000. And we can manage it with these 5 guys in a very tight, because they interact with each other. And interestingly enough, they always give the right of way to the robot who's about to deliver, not the robot who just delivered. So now the biggest challenge that we have is to train staff to allow the robots to do their thing and not try to do it for them, because that delays the whole operation. That's right now our biggest challenge, because now that the servers get so used to the robots, they try to undercut them, and then that holds them for a few seconds or minutes until they get repositioned to finish their function.
Taco, you said these robots are very smart, but sir, I believe you're the smartest of all of them.
Well, if I was smart, I probably wouldn't be in the restaurant business, but what's in your blood is in your blood.
I agree. I absolutely agree. Maria, I believe we have some questions.
Yes. Taco, there's a question right now in the Q&A section. It's an anonymous attendee who's asking, do you allow customers to take the plates off the robot?
That is a very good question. And it's always a challenge, because in the one hand, when customers are for the first time interacting with the robots, they really don't know what to do with it. Once they do, they do it themselves. Now, we always put linens or some sort of device to help them if the plate is very hot. And we do have a little sign that says, please watch out, the plate may be extremely hot. But what happens is new customers won't touch them because they don't know what to do. But regular customers, they're already interacting and grabbing the plates themselves. You just have to be mindful about the temperature of the plate itself.
Thank you, Taco. Another one, any problem with kids around the robot, climbing on it, trying to touch it all the time?
Well, we encourage them to touch them because they interact with you, especially the BellaBot, that if you touch their ears or starts telling you to please stop, that they don't like their ears touched, but you can touch their head. And the kids love it. And interestingly enough, we haven't had, and of course this is going to happen today, any kids trying to climb on the robot. They're very respectful of the robots, sometimes even more than adults, because somehow they feel this immediate connection with technology and robotics, that they respect their space and their position, and they just embrace them almost like a pet. It's very, very interesting. So we haven't had that problem. I'm not saying it won't happen, but in our case, it hasn't happened, and we have a big kid element. We even have a kids menu, and of course, during brunch, the amount of kids that we have is tremendous, and they absolutely love. I mean, I've had even 9-month-old babies touching the button to send back the robot to the kitchen, and their faces just illuminate that you would not believe, and they are completely aware of what is going on, even though they can't talk.
Yep, great.
Thank you, Taco. We have another one. Jimmy's asking, did you see a difference in your payroll expenses?
Huge difference. And it's not necessarily because of the robots, because we just don't have the people. But the thing is that what made a big difference, obviously, the robot immediately made obsolete the food runner position. Now we don't need a food runner. We haven't had a food runner in a year and a half. And that was on weekends, it was as much as 3 food runners, and during the week, at least 1. So if you do the math on those, just 3 days of those people paid for the least cost of the robot. So from that perspective, yes, it makes a huge difference. But more importantly, what it make a huge difference is on the income of everybody. And not everybody is in, sign on this plan, but we started charging a staff service fee when the pandemic came in, because most of our orders were takeout and no one was leaving a tip to go and take out. So I was losing servers like flies. So we had to come out with an alternative, which is a mandatory 10% on takeout orders and a mandatory 20% on dine-in. And this percentage is being divided by the entire staff, not just the servers, but the entire staff. And what that did is that our regulars tip on top of that. So it's not unheard of to have a table that would leave 30, sometimes even 40% between tip and service fee. And that has allowed us to increase the income of the kitchen substantially, because a portion of the service fee goes to the kitchen, not the tips. The tips go straight to the service staff. But the fee that we charge, we divided between the hostess, the bartender, the managers, the kitchen. Everybody gets a little of it, even though the majority goes to the service staff. A portion goes to the kitchen, and it makes a big difference. It could make as much as $4 or $5 an hour per kitchen member. And the beauty of it is that increases as the volume of the restaurant and the hard work increases, and decreases as the restaurant is slower. And therefore, I don't have the additional burden of meeting the payroll if no one showed up, because our base is a little lower, but with the tips or the fees that we distribute, it makes a huge difference. And because we need less staff, everybody's making more money.
Thank you, Taco. We have another one. Juan is asking, do you think robots could work in all restaurant concepts?
Yes, they can. The thing is with different functions. Even in a high-end restaurant, if you were to find a specific function that would make sense in your restaurants, it could. Obviously, on fine dining, you would expect more of the humans, but even those could benefit with certain activities that the robots can help. Maybe not as much as fast casual or casual dining, that will definitely see the huge support of it. But having been in both sides of the spectrum, and as you know, when you are in the fast casual or fast food industry, you think that you should be on the full service because you're going to make the same amount of money for the same 10 times the amount of money for the same amount of work. And when you're in the full service, you want to be in the fast casual because you don't want to deal with all the people and all the headaches, and you think they're going to make more money with less people. It's the same on both sides. The same issues, just in a different perspective, but it's the same issues. Therefore, it can help in every single operation. But you need somebody to help you identify the functions that make sense, because a lot of functions you may think make sense to you, but they're not practical or cost effective. And that's when you need somebody who has experience.
Thank you, Cedric and Taco. We have one on the chat. You mentioned, Taco, the changes to the process at the expo. Any other changes needed to accommodate the robots?
Well, you do need to find out where the stations are going to be, because certain robots really need to make it back to the kitchen and the bar, but some other ones need to be in a different area to be faster the service to customers or the faster the support from a server. So that you need to spend some time, and don't be disappointed if your first choice didn't work. It's okay. You just play with where to put them and how to put them, and you eventually will present itself the best option. That doesn't mean that it doesn't work from the beginning, because it will work. It's just that it will be even more efficient and more effective as you get familiarized with the flow of the restaurant and the timing. We haven't had the problems with the charging, because we leave it charging overnight and it lasts us the entire breakfast, lunch, and dinner shifts without any problems. The only have problems is somebody forgot to charge it, but I believe the new versions even have self-charging stations where the robots will go and charge themselves. So, even that could be addressed.
Thank you. We have one more. Joanna is asking if you're planning to implement more robots.
Absolutely. We are not just this kind of robots, but robots in every possible aspect. We've been talking with different companies to do robotic delivery in a 2 to 5 mile radius. Unfortunately, in Dallas, it's been a challenge to find a company who's ready to do it in the Dallas market. They only do it in colleges and closed environments. But that's one thing that we really need to, because we have way too many problems with the delivery companies of the world, the Ubers, between the cost, the quality of the product, the grazing, the orders not making it. It is a nightmare. So that's one area that we really want to do. If possible, even do drone delivery for drinks and smaller orders when allowed. We are also already testing a robotic barista that can make all of our coffee drinks through a very automated machine that can work with milk and alternative milks. And in that way, help the bartender, because sometimes the barista doesn't show up and we do a heavy volume on coffees, and it's hard for one person to do the coffee and to do the cocktails, because they're all craft cocktails that are laborious. So we're looking into that, and we're already testing it. We're using smart vending equipment, so that, because we do a heavy sweets and baked goods program, and of course that takes a long time to find somebody to charge you for the cookies and the cakes and the sweets. So we have smart vending that can help people serve themselves, and that has been extremely successful. And now we're talking and looking into robotics to help us with the kitchen functions and even server functions, like the rolling of silverware and cleaning and polishing glasses and silverware, and some other functions that may benefit from robotic applications. So yes. And the one thing that I can't wait to have, that I think is going to revolutionize everything again, is when humanoids are actually cost effective and fully functional to work in an environment like a restaurant. When you get a robot that has full dexterity in their hands and can actually deliver things, pick up things, take your order, and interact with you, the hospitality world is going to be another one. And I believe that's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years, or at least start.